what we're going to demonstrate on the swap is we've got two systems here. I have a DSS1 we're showing here that we have not created the volume group from the unit S00. And of course I have another one ready on standby where we do have the swap created. Now, when you first have a volume group ready to be formatted, you'll be presented as, they'll be presented as units. Here you can see it as 0000, and of course you can have subsequent more units. For obvious reasons, you can use it for faster rate arrays for your databases, or just for a general bit bucket. You can have a very large volume of, let's say, 60 terabytes, and that could be as well. But regardless of what swap is, all swap is going to be used for is going to carve out, and about 4 gig is the standard default, and it's going to be used to store memory areas on the hard drives instead of using the RAM. So the DSS software, what it does, it'll dump memory. Well, we'll go ahead and get this started. It'll basically dumps the memory to swap in case of additional memory is needed. So many times customers have issues with a RAID array, and they might need to use the repair file system that's in the DSS console. We'll be showing that so that way you have an understanding of the full spectrum of what the swap is used for and how to use it. So here we're going ahead and formatting our volume group, and right now when it does this, basically we're filing it into an XFS file system. We'll give this a second, and it should be coming up, and on the left side you'll see that's noted as VG for volume group 00. Let's go ahead and click on it. Now we're in the volume manager. You can see that by default the swap was created by 4 gig. So when you create your volumes or you create more volume groups, the swap is automatically calculated for 4 gig. Now you can always decrease and increase. Typically, we're only using the 2 gigabit volume of the 2 gigabit of swap. The extra is there for reservations. A lot of people like to increase this in case they get into a tight spot, they need to add additional storage. If you feel you would never go beyond or need any more than, let's say, 1.8 terabytes, what we have here, then you'd be fine. In some cases, I do recommend that you add additional space for swap in case you do need to use it. If you run out of space and your volumes are full and you may need to add additional capacity, that's why we leave it there. So you can add another 2 gig to be able to remove data, to use snapshots, to be able to replicate the data. This way it'll help you to give you some reserve space to be used. And swap, we're not using that much. In some cases, we might be using it for cache, where the memory, the additional memory is needed for the repair file system. Now let's take a look. How do I increase the swap if I ever need to before I start adding other additional logical volumes? If you click on the action bar right here, you'll see Modify Swap. Now here we can add additional swap space. So let's just go ahead and put a value of 20 gig. And then the swap space will be increased to 24. So you have 4 that is by default, and of course we just added the 20 gig. Now, if I were to have a large volume, let's say I'll take the rest of the capacity on the NAS here, a new NAS volume, and I were to take all of it, I think we'll get 72 in there. Let's go ahead and type that. Looks like it rounded off because it serves some space for the system and also for replication. So you won't be able to use it, but it's very minimal. It ends up being like 3.8 megs. So here we don't have any more free space available. Let's say you filled up this NAS volume to its completion. There's no more space available for you to store files on. Well, this is where swap becomes important. At this point, I can actually delete the swap and not worry about having any performance degradation or system corruption, or if there's going to be an issue with DSS performing properly. So now I have free space available. So at this point, what I can do is I can modify the swap, or basically say new swap, put my 4 gig in there. So now I have my 20 gig available to use for snapshots and other uses, especially for adding on additional capacity to my NAS logical volume LV000, like you see right here. So that's really unique that Swap can help you out in special areas in this case. Now, let's say you had an issue, you had an array controller that had problems where there was inconsistencies, maybe there was some buffer errors or it was degraded. And so in this case, then you can add additional swap space, because here's what happens. Let's say that I had an 18 terabyte NAS logical volume and you only had 4 gig of memory. Well, when you run the repair file system, you may need to add additional memory, but a lot of times you're physically not able to, because you don't have the physical RAM available to be able to purchase it the next day, because you're dealing with server RAM, which could be fully buffered DIMMs. You're just not going to be able to have those unless you have them on stock on site, which is very rare. So what you can do is you can substitute the amount of RAM with Swap. So if you have additional space, you can add the additional space to the Swap and increase it. So this is where it becomes value doing a repair file system. So in this case, let's say I needed really 12 more gigs of memory. What I can do is increase the Swap and say I have 4 gig of memory right now, but it's really not enough. The repair file system is taking too long because of lack of memory. You're getting error messages. What we'll do is we'll add 12 gig here, and we'll use this for the repair file system, because that's what the repair file system is going to do. It's going to go back to Swap, pull from that, and then this will give you enough memory. Now, when you do the repair file system, it will be not as fast. It won't be as fast as the RAM being in there physically, but it will get you at a point where you could repair the file system. And that's very valuable, especially when you're trying to, you're in a tight spot, the array controller is in a degraded mode, it's finally fully repaired itself, and now you really should be doing a repair file system, especially with NAS volumes. So if we look at the, let's go ahead and pull up. Here I'm in the repair file system. And if you're really running slow, this is where you want to increase the memory. We have seen cases where you can run the repair file system. We'll go ahead and run it for this other system that we have on the side. Now keep in mind when you do a repair file system that there will be a restart of the system. So if you have iSCSI connections with fiber channel targets and iSCSI targets, please be aware of that and have them disconnect. It looks like I got fat fingers today. There we go. So at this point, what the repair is doing is going to do a file system check, clear some inodes. Basically, it's going to clear up any issues. Now, what we've done is we created some problems on the other system so that way it can do some repairs. And that's why it's taking a little bit longer. So in this case, when we only have, let's say, 2 or 4 gig of memory, and we have anything, let's say, 20 terabytes, we probably want to add additional physical memory, but in some cases we're showing here that you are not able to, you use Swap. So at this point, Swap has really helped us out to be able to run the repair file system faster. And at this point, it will force you to do a reboot. Now, once we get to disconnected, you're disconnected. In the we are thinking about probably forcing many customers to add additional capacity in your Swap and make some recommendations. As you can see, if you have no space available on some of your logical volumes, or if you're running out of snapshot space, you can always draw from Swap. So this is important to know that it can really help you, especially in some tight spots. You know, once again, I've seen systems where people don't have any Swap in the performance when they run the repair file system and they're out of memory. What do you do? And you're locked in. So let's say we do not have any Swap available. So now, and let's say we don't even have capacity available. Let's say that's 0. We have 0 free space. So at this point, what you can do, there are some tricks. What you can do is you can add an existing hot spare on your RAID controller if you have one, or you can put a drive in there, but you don't have memory. So you can actually add a hot spare to your existing RAID controller and increase the capacity for free space. And typically you would just go into your RAID controller and be able to look for a spare drive that is available, and if you have a hot spare, take the hot spare off and then be able to add it or do what's called the RAID migration for your RAID array. Keep in mind, it's not really recommended to do that, so you're better off just getting another drive and be able to keep your hot spare because if anything were to happen. Now, if you had a RAID 6, well, then that's fine. You can go ahead and utilize your hot spare and increase your existing capacity. Another trick you can use, and for critical issues, you can always use another drive and place that drive as single drive into your volume groups and add additional a unit. So what you would be able to do is have another unit, so the unit S001. You can also use an iSCSI target from another DSS V6. So we can increase the swap there to be used if you have low amount of memory. So if you have another DSS V6, you could use the iSCSI target, even fiber channel target, bring that in a unit, create another unit, and then increase your swap space all the way to its maximum. There was a case where there was a customer that had a 250 terabyte NAS logical volume. He just didn't have the amount of memory to do that. So what we were able to do is be able to use another DSS, bring an iSCSI target, use the built-in iSCSI target initiator. We go right into setup, and you could use the built-in iSCSI initiator to connect to another DSS V6 system. So what that allowed him to do was to create another volume group, and from there have a whole new volume group and increase the swap on his new unit S001, use the whole space as the swap space, and that really helped him out instead of having purchasing additional memory. So, and you can always remove that drive or that unit, since you always want to keep S00 your default unit. Well, that's pretty much it for swap. We wanted to make it quick and short so everybody understands how to utilize swap. And in case you have any questions, you can always ask me in the chat window here, and also submit questions in our pre-sales at open-e.com. What we're going to do is just go ahead and add the swap back in. And typically, like I said, we only use 2 gig, and we usually keep an extra 2 gig necessary for if you need to utilize it, remove it, then add 2 gig back in, then you'll have 2 gig of free space, similar to what I did here. So best practices, I always recommend to add additional gigabyte of space to your swap. You're not going to be using it in case of emergencies, in case you need for additional snapshot, replication, but mostly for repairing the file system in case of a RAID array issue that went in degraded mode, and after it's completed, to run the repair file system. By the way, everybody, the new release that I wanted everybody to know is that I'm on the latest version, 5845. Please be aware of this and update your systems if we have some new mechanisms. You can always check out the releases, maintenance, software update, and you can look at the release notes. They're also in your user portal as well that you download. So here in the latest version I have, you can see all the release notes and updated information, the fixes, the testing is what we're doing, and also the known issues. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Open-E, and always go on to our website, as there is always new information in our blogs. There's a lot of information in our logs that everybody will be able to see. If you click right in here at the blog section, we've updated some new notes, especially with SSDs, and there's some performance values as well as on SSD. If you search in the windows of DSS right for the Open-E website, you'll see all the information there. Thank you, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you next time.